On January 1st, 2025, the global financial timeline split in two. It started with a single piece of paper in Beijing, a signature that sent a shockwave through the financial nervous system of the world. China, the undisputed engine of global manufacturing, made a declaration that should have frozen the markets instantly. Silver, the metal that powers your smartphone, drives your electric car, and builds the solar panels trying to save the planet, was now under state lockdown. Export controls. The message from the Ministry of Commerce was brutal in its simplicity. We are keeping it all. The logic was sound. China produces 80% of the world's solar panels. They are building an AI empire. They need every ounce of conductive metal they can get. The world held its breath. Prices climbed. Manufacturers in the West sweated. The supply line was effectively cut. But then, just 9 months later, the story didn't just change. It shattered. October 2025. In a move that defied every piece of economic logic, China opened the floodgates. In a single month, 660 tons of silver left Chinese ports. This wasn't just a shipment. It was the largest export volume in recorded history. And where did they send it? Straight to the London bullion market, the very throat they were supposedly squeezing. This wasn't a policy change. This wasn't diplomacy. This was an emergency dump. A panic move. Now, pause and ask yourself, if you flood a market with supply, what happens to the price? Economics 101 says it crashes. That is the terrifying part of this story. It didn't crash. It didn't even blink. Despite flooding the market with $37 billion worth of metal, silver didn't fall. It rocketed. It hit $66.21 an ounce. An all-time high. China dumped the vault, and the market swallowed it whole and screamed for more. Why? To answer that, we have to peel back the layers of the global economy and look at a disaster that has been brewing for 5 years. To understand the panic in Beijing, you have to look inside the vault. Specifically, the Shanghai Futures Exchange. Rewind to January 2021. Shanghai holds nearly 4,000 tons of silver. It was a fortress of wealth, a strategic buffer meant to last for decades. Now, fast forward to December 2025. That fortress is gone. The inventory stands at just 780 tons. Let that number sink in. From 4,000 to 780. That is a 75% wipeout in less than 5 years. The media narrative was that China was hoarding silver to control the world, to manipulate the price, to squeeze the West. The reality is far more disturbing. They weren't restricting exports to be greedy. They were restricting exports because they were running on empty. We are looking at a manufacturing superpower that consumes 19,000 tons of silver a year, but only mines 3,300 tons. That is a math problem that doesn't resolve itself. That is a deficit of nearly 16,000 tons every single year. For years, they filled this gap by draining their savings account, those 4,000 tons in the warehouse. But you can only burn the furniture to heat the house for so long. Eventually, you run out of chairs. And in October 2025, they ran out of chairs. So, why did they export the 660 tons if they were running out? Why give away your last meal? Because the global system was having a heart attack. Here is the mechanism of the crisis. Stage 1. The London squeeze. In October, the London markets, the beating heart of the Western financial system, began to seize. Physical inventories were so tight that paper contracts were becoming meaningless. Buyers were paying massive premiums, extra cash under the table, just to get physical metal delivered. The spread between the paper price and the real price was blowing out. The system was minutes away from breaking. If London fails to deliver silver, confidence in the entire global metals market evaporates. China had a choice. Option A. Let the global pricing mechanism collapse. This destroys the global economy, which, ironically, destroys China's ability to sell its solar panels and electronics. Option B. Bleed their own stone-dry reserves to save the system. They chose survival. They raided the cupboard. Those 660 tons weren't a gift. They were a defibrillator, a desperate injection to stop the heart attack. But here is the critical detail most analysts missed. China's silver usually trades at a premium. It's more expensive in Shanghai than in London. It makes zero financial sense to export it. You lose money on every bar. Yet, they did it anyway. That tells you this wasn't about profit. It was about preventing a systemic collapse. But the story gets darker. While China was patching the hole in London, a new player entered the game. A giant waking up. India. While the West traded paper contracts on screens, India was buying the real thing. In just 2 months, September and October 2025, India imported 2,600 tons of silver. Think about that scale. China dumped 660 tons to save the world. India swallowed that, and then ate another 2,000 tons on top of it. So where did that metal go? Follow the map. That silver China sent to London? It didn't stay in the British vaults. It was leased, routed through Hong Kong, sent to the UK, and immediately devoured by the Indian market. It's a global shell game. China sends metal to London to suppress the price. London sends metal to India to satisfy demand. And suddenly, everyone looks at their vaults, and the shelves are bare. Why is India buying? 2 reasons. 1. A massive cultural shift towards physical assets. 2. India is building its own solar empire. They are doing exactly what China did 10 years ago. We now have 2 distinct massive populations, China and India, fighting over the same shrinking pie. And the West is standing in the middle, holding a paper receipt for metal that doesn't exist. This brings us to the fundamental problem. Some people ask, why not just use something else? If silver is running out, switch to copper. Switch to aluminum. That is the trillion-dollar misunderstanding. You can't. Physics doesn't negotiate. Physics doesn't care about your budget. Silver is the most conductive metal on Earth. Period. It is the most thermally conductive metal on Earth. Period. There is no second best. You want a solar panel to work at maximum efficiency? You need silver paste. If you use copper, it oxidizes, and the panel fails in 5 years. You want an AI data center to function? These chips run hotter than anything we've ever built. To keep them from melting, you need silver contacts. You want a Tomahawk missile to hit its target? You need silver in the guidance system. We are digging a hole. In 2024, the world consumed 15,000 tons more than it mined. We are bridging the gap by burning through old stockpiles. But the stockpiles are gone. Let's do the math that no one on Wall Street wants to talk about. Shanghai has 780 tons left visible. China consumes 1,583 tons a month. Do the division. 780 divided by 1,583. That is 0.5 months. 2 weeks. That is roughly 14 days of visible supply. Even if they have secret hidden reserves, let us be generous and say they have 5,000 tons hidden in a military bunker. That buys them 3 months. We aren't staring at a timeline of decades. We are staring at a timeline of months. This isn't a cycle. It's a death spiral with a mathematical endpoint. And we can prove it with hard numbers that don't lie. According to the Silver Institute, global silver deficits have persisted for 5 to 6 consecutive years. The 2024 deficit was 215 million ounces, the second largest in over 20 years. Industry analysts project that if China reduces exports by just 50%, global deficits could exceed 5,000 metric tons annually. But China didn't reduce by 50%. In October, they increased exports by 213% versus the monthly average, and it still wasn't enough to bring prices down. Here's what that tells us about the true state of this market. The system is structurally broken. Demand from industrial applications has permanently outstripped mine supply, and China, the world's swing supplier, is now scraping the bottom of the barrel. Shanghai stockpiles are at 780 tons and falling every single day. China's production was 3,300 tons in 2024, down from 3,400 in 2023. China's consumption was 19,000 tons in 2024. That is a 15,700-ton deficit that can only be filled by imports or inventory drawdowns. And we just watched them draw down 660 tons in a single month to save London's market. The export restrictions weren't about hoarding silver for strategic advantage. They were about survival, about keeping their industrial base functional. Beijing knows their domestic industry can't function without silver, not their solar panels, not their electronics, not their military applications. But they also know that if London's market seizes up, it triggers a global supply chain collapse that hurts everyone, including China's export-dependent economy. So, they sacrifice their stockpile to keep the system running, to prevent the pricing mechanism from completely breaking down. But here's the problem that keeps commodity strategists awake at night. You can only do that once, maybe twice if you're lucky. After that, the math takes over, and the math doesn't negotiate. If you want to understand where this ends, look at what China already did with rare earth elements. Because they're following the exact same playbook. In 2010, China controlled 97% of global rare earth production. They used export quotas to dominate the market and secure strategic advantage. The result? Rare earth prices exploded overnight. The global supply chain restructured at enormous cost, and Western countries launched desperate efforts to develop alternative sources. Sound familiar? It should, because we're watching the same movie play out with silver. China currently produces about 3,300 tons of silver annually, making them the third largest producer behind Peru and Mexico. But they consume 19,000 tons annually. That 15,700-ton deficit is filled by imports. Exactly like rare earths before the export restrictions triggered the crisis. The difference with rare earths? China had stockpiles to deploy as a strategic weapon. With silver, their stockpiles are nearly exhausted. Shanghai Futures Exchange data shows just 780 tons remaining as of December 11, 2025. At their current consumption rate of 19,000 tons per year, that's 1,583 tons per month. That represents less than 2 weeks of supply. Even if we assume they have additional off-exchange inventories, which analysts believe are quite large but unquantified, the trend is unmistakable and terrifying. China is running out. And when they run out, one of two things happens. Both of them are catastrophic for price stability. Option 1. Chinese industrial production slows dramatically. Solar, EVs, electronics, all face supply constraints. Option 2. China bids up global prices even higher to secure imports, sparking a bidding war with India, the West, and other industrial nations. Neither option is bullish for price stability. Both options are explosive for silver. But here's what makes this different from rare earths. What makes this crisis potentially more severe? You can't easily substitute silver. Rare earths had alternative materials for some applications. Engineers found workarounds. Silver doesn't have that luxury in its critical applications. It has the highest electrical conductivity of any metal. Period. No exceptions. No close seconds. It has the highest thermal conductivity of any metal. Period. Physics doesn't negotiate. It has unique antimicrobial properties that are irreplaceable in medical applications. No other element can do what silver does. For solar panels, you can't use copper paste. It oxidizes and kills efficiency, dropping panel performance 20 to 30%. For high-frequency electronics, you can't use aluminum. Resistance is too high, and devices don't function properly. For certain medical devices, you can't use substitutes. Infection risk is too high. People die. This is why even a 660-ton dump from China couldn't stop the rally. Couldn't even slow it down. The demand is non-negotiable. Industry needs silver to function, and the supply is finite, increasingly concentrated in fewer hands. The math is simple. The consequences are not. Let's do the calculation everyone's avoiding. The math that reveals exactly how little time we have left. China's remaining Shanghai stockpile, 780 tons as of December 11, 2025. China's annual consumption, 19,000 tons. Monthly consumption, 1,583 tons. Days of supply remaining, 14.8 days. Less than 2 weeks of visible inventory. Now, before you say, but China has off-exchange inventories, you're absolutely right. They probably do, held in strategic reserves and state warehouses we can't see. But here's what we know for certain, what the data proves beyond doubt. Shanghai visible inventory has collapsed 75% since 2021. China exported 660 tons in October, draining hidden stocks to save London's market. And consumption is accelerating, not slowing. The solar boom continues expanding. Even if China has 5,000 or 10,000 tons of hidden inventory, and that's a generous estimate, we're talking about months, not years before exhaustion. And every month that passes, the deficit compounds. The hole gets deeper. So how does this movie end? We don't have to guess. We just have to look at the calendar. January 2026, the holiday rush hits. Shanghai inventories hit critical lows, likely dropping below 500 tons. The psychological panic sets in. February 2026, the export bans return. But this time, it's not a control. It's a total lockout. And this time, there is no emergency release valve. There are no 660 tons coming to save London. March 2026, the paper market breaks. When the stockpile hits zero, price is the only thing left to balance the equation. $66 was just the warm-up. $100 is inevitable. Analysts are whispering numbers that sound impossible. $200, $300 an ounce. The U.S. government knows it. Why do you think they quietly added silver to the critical minerals list in 2025? They aren't preparing for a trade dispute. They are preparing for a resource war. This is exactly what happened with rare earth minerals in 2010. China controlled the supply, squeezed the market, and prices went up 2,000%. But with silver, it's worse. Because you can't build the future without it. China tried to save the market in October. It failed. The buffer is gone. The deficit is growing. And the world is still hungry. The math is inevitable. The crash isn't coming. It's already here. We just haven't hit the ground yet.